Hi guys, the House of Commons Hooligan, as I like to call him, the Tory MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, Jonathan Gullis, threw down the gauntlet to ex-footballer turned sports commentator and political activist Gary Lineker. The Conservative MP seems to be a bit upset with Lineker over his criticism of the Tory government and party and his weighing in on political issues like immigration. Gullis challenged Lineker to stand in his constituency of Stoke-on-Trent North at the next general election. Why? I'm not sure, because it doesn't look like Jonathan is going to hold on to his seat. Have a listen to this.
Well, Gary's constantly trying to get lots of likes on Twitter, or X, sorry, as it's now called. I mean, ultimately, I've written to the Director General because the incoming chair of the BBC said he in himself thought this was a potential breach of the social media guidelines. The Director General seems to have just done a whitewash. So clearly Gary Lineker either runs the BBC or the Director General wasn't too scared to actually stand up to him. But if the BBC's name is going to keep getting dragged through the mud and embarrass all the many presenters, both in my local news reporters, radio presenters, who have to live by a very different set of rules to Gary Lineker, then ultimately he will do the job that I think we should do, which is see the BBC no longer funded by the taxpayer, and then it can do what things like Sky do, which is actually be allowed to have maybe reporters have more public opinions, obviously within the Ofcom rules that you're guided by. So I think Gary just needs to spend less time virtue signalling and more time talking about football, which he's actually very good at. But it's just a shame that he seems to think that he somehow is a career, politician in making. And as I've said to him, if he's really desperate to get into politics, Stoke-on-Trent North, put himself on the ballot paper and we'll let the public decide.
What, you think you beat Gary Lineker then, do you?
Absolutely.
OK, bring it on.
Bring it on. Even Sophie Ridge found it funny. Jonathan Gullis wouldn't have a hope. If Gary Lineker blew his nose into a handkerchief and emptied that contents at the ballot box, it would have a better chance of winning than Jonathan Gullis would. Gullis won his seat back in 2019 with a majority of 6,286. That was on the back of Get Brexit Done and Back Boris. Boris Johnson is gone and Brexit has been demonstrated to be an absolute failure. Even Nigel Farage has said so. So, it's not looking very good for Jonathan. We've already seen massive majorities of over 20,000 being overturned in by-elections. I know by-elections are different to the general, but it's not looking good for this Tory MP. It's likely he will lose his seat. Now, back to the point of going up against Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker is really rubbing the Tories the wrong way. He's really getting under their skin because he's using his massive platform online to talk about issues that are important to him. And these issues are in conflict with the Tory party policies. Now, Gary Lineker is not, as far as I know, bringing up these issues as a commentator on the BBC, but he's doing it within his social media platform. So on Twitter, on X, on YouTube, wherever, he's using that platform to talk about issues that are important to him. He's not mixing it very much with his job, as far as I know. Now, if he is, then that's an issue to be brought up, but I don't think that's the case. But we've already seen people like Andrew Neil, who's a brexiteer, who writes for The Spectator, having his own show on the BBC, a political show. So there's no problem with Andrew Neil, but there's a problem with Gary Lineker for some reason. Now, to the point about, Gary Lineker should just get involved in politics. He should try and run as an MP. Why should he do that? If Gary Lineker became... Some people have been calling for him to do this, but I would be dead set against it because Gary Lineker is in a stronger position outside, trying to influence politics from outside, than if he were to run as an MP. Because if he ran as an MP, he'd be constricted. He would have to follow the Labour Party line. I would imagine he'd be a Labour MP. There's a good chance he'd win the seat, but he would have very little power because he wouldn't be able to influence. He'd have to follow the party line. He could rebel, but then he'd end up getting kicked out, and then he'd have no influence. So he has stronger influence outside. The same with Carol Vorderman. People have said, why doesn't she run as an MP? She'd be really successful. To a certain extent, yes, but her influence would be greatly diminished. So it's actually better for Gary Lineker to be on the outside, influencing, and they have a better position on the outside than they would have inside. So I don't see Gary Lineker running as an MP. What would be the point of challenging Jonathan Gullis, because he's likely to lose his seat anyway? He's going to lose his seat to a generic MP, candidate, Labour candidate or Liberal Democrat, probably a Labour candidate. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.